conversational tree, can you say, is more or less dead, and the job is really in the loop now, or the control plane.
What the models do, you can only influence so much. Then the client using your platform, which is building on the models, and bunches as well as other technologies, and then those guardrails are coming into play, which is provided by the platform. Then there's guardrails that I can infect as a customer. Yeah. And so, do you see where I'm going with this? So like the better the models become, and the more powerful they become, arguably speaking, perhaps the more dangerous they can become if you've given them access to all of your company's tools.
One is to design great and safe agents, but another thing is how to build tests that are actually validating that is correct, right? Customers never wanted an answer, right? They just want things done. So for us, I think it's all about how do we get things done?
This conversation is with Rasmus Hauch, who is the CTO of Boost.ai. And this conversation is a bit of a meta conversation, really. Rasmus is an immense individual. He's very experienced in AI, been running the technology side at Boost.ai for a long time. Boost, as you probably know by now, is an AI platform providing enterprises with the capabilities to build your own AI agents, etc., specializing really in customer experience. And this conversation with Rasmus is all about how do you build the thing that other people use to build the thing. So every person and their dog is trying to build AI agents right now, and you need technology to do that. And the technology that you use to do that also has to be built by somebody. And Boost is one of those providers, and Rasmus and his team are the people responsible for building out that platform. And so this conversation is all about how do you build the platform that builders use to build the agents? And within that, there are so many lessons in terms of best practices that you can take on in terms of how you build scalable, secure, and reliable AI agents. It's an immense conversation. We talk about privacy, transparency, governance. We talk about experience. We talk about testing in a very large degree. We talk about channel-specific stuff, voice AI stuff, chat stuff, agentic stuff, and you name it. It is a very, very interesting conversation. For those of you that want to get under the hood in terms of how agents work and the best practices to making them deployable at scale, this is a great conversation for you with Rasmus Hauch, CTO of Boost.ai. All right, Rasmus. Hello there, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, Kane. Thanks a lot. I'm great.
Good.
So, enjoying the good weather here.
Yeah. It's been all right recently, hasn't it? It's been good. Last time I saw you, you were gracing the stage at Boost Camp last year, talking about all the nice, exciting features coming up in the Boost platform.
Yes. Yeah. And luckily, we wrote a lot of it out as well. And seeing a lot of success with that as well. So that's great.
Nice. I think some of our listeners, I'm sure, will be familiar with Boost. We had Henry on recently. We're talking a lot about voice AI. We're talking a lot about kind of like the rise and the surge in voice AI, the interest there, which is really good. Some of the use cases and examples you're seeing from clients and stuff like that. I was curious in terms of kind of like this conversation, because everyone's now looking at how do we build, agents? How do we turn chatbots into agents? How do we kind of have a more of an agentic approach to our conversational systems and stuff like that? And everyone's kind of really trying to make it work, make the interaction work, make sure the capability works, make sure it's secure, all that kind of stuff, which obviously that's what you're doing with Boost. But there's another layer involved here, which is that you're actually a CTO kind of responsible for building the technology that then enables others to build on the technology to then achieve the goals. So it's like you've got two things to worry about. One is how do you build a really great agent? But two, how do you build the thing that builds really great agents? And I thought that was a really interesting discussion that you never hear spoken about. So I'll be interested just to kind of pick your brains about it,
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting discussion there, and also a big challenge, right? Because as you say, we're not the ones building out the final user experience, right? That's up to our customers, and how do we guide our customers in the best possible way so that they do the stuff that's necessary, both in terms of how to create a great customer experience, but also in order to how do they set it up in the most safe way, and with the necessary security and so on for a regulated enterprise. And I think that's definitely a big challenge for us, right? So how to guide the customers, and obviously there's the obvious things like education. So having an education portal, having some great educational material for our AI trainers to use, but also it's about guiding the users through the setup of a new conversation, right? So it could be like, now I have, for a financial institution, it could be like, now I have blocked my card, and but now I want to do a new use case, which is remortgaging my house, right? So remortgaging my house, how can I create a great customer experience for that? What kind of backend systems do I need to connect? How do I need to connect them? But also like, how do I ensure the right level of security for the end customers logging into the platform? What kind of authentication is required? But also, so there's all of these sort of basic stuff, right? That our customers needs to get in place. But then, upon that, you also need to make sure that you get the right user experience. And it is a challenge to design the right guardrails, to design the right agents to actually fit your need. And one of the things that I really like to guide the users with when they talk about it is more like, okay, so fine. Now you have an agent for remortgaging a house that is integrated with your backend systems and so on. But it's like, then how can I actually make sure that this is working as it should, right? So one of the key elements for me is the ability to test your agents once you set it up, right? So and that goes for digital a conversation like WhatsApp or on your website or other things, but also on voice. And as you know, I mean, voice is not just SIP and PSTN anymore. It's also WebRTC directly on your website, directly inside your apps, like in an integrated voice experience where you're not just calling a phone, but you're actually having these integrated experiences, which I think will be more and more, we'll see more and more of with our customers. And I think one of the key challenges there is how do you test that, right? So one thing that we've done is that we've set up this very elaborate test suite and test automation where you can basically build out personas, right? So I'm a 70-year-old lady trying to remortgaging my house. So what kind of things would I say, right? What kind of challenges would I have as a persona testing this thing, right? And really going into the details with those things, I think is a crucial element of the entire user experience. Because and what we've seen is that these personas is great for the initial testing, right? So and you can execute like thousands of both digital conversations but also voice conversations, right? So you can have a digital voice acting as the customer, and then you have the voice platform then responding to that. And there's multiple elements to a voice conversation today. It's not just about is it a good user experience? It's also about how is the latency for a certain kind of queries. It might be that you're talking to an agent that has a lot of knowledge, that has a lot of documents, that has a lot of a long instruction set. Maybe it has some guardrails as well. Then how do you ensure that those agents gives a prompt response, right? You can also, have you can choose which specific models you want that agent to use when it's responding back to the user. So there's all these complicated elements that you need to ensure, and there the testing is a big part of that, right? So being able to test that these latencies are good, and also test that the answer that you're getting back from the AI agent is what you need it to be, right? Because one thing is to conduct a test, another thing is to evaluate whether these tests were actually working or not, right? You might be able to simulate like 1,000 conversations, but then afterwards, how do you know if these 1,000 conversations were actually working or not? And there are some specific things that we do to ensure you have the right evaluation criteria so that you can actually test. And the great thing about testing is that once you set up these test suites, you can you can retest it with different settings and parameters, right? So you can say, okay, now I built my agent for me remarketing my house. Then I need to, maybe if I need to have a more accurate response, I could change the model, right? And if I change the model, well, then that might affect latency. So it's really all about those choices of what kind of specific use case do you have? What kind of instructions do I have? What kind of knowledge? What am I trying to achieve with the customer? That all depends on these small choices, right? That are really, really critical to ensure just the best possible user experience for the customer. So for us, it's all about ensuring to guide the customers in the right direction, especially in those areas, right? With the skill set that we have. So I think also another part of that is then, well, once you've done the testing and set up, then you also need to do, you start going live, and then what happens, right? Then the first thing that happens is the customer says something you didn't expect. So then how do you deal with that, right? And I'm sure you heard, Kane, about the different exploitations when it comes to voice services, that you can say, the fact that you can exploit that the agent is helpful and have it say things that it would not normally say. So that's typically some of the challenges we see when these things become live afterwards.
And how much do you rely as a platform? I know you've got sort of services and stuff like that you help clients kind of build these solutions and stuff, but as a platform that ultimately will, it'll be scalable if anyone can use it, more or less. But a lot of what you just described there is more about process rather than it is technology. So you need to know, for example, in the test cases, what test cases are you testing for? How many tests should you be running? What should you be looking for? What does kind of evaluation criteria look like? What use cases are you testing? That's more process and methodology than it is technology. And the same is true, I think, probably in terms of the way that you would go about designing an AI agent in the first place. So what is our use cases? Where's our data? What does a good conversation look like? Then how does that turn into a prompt? And how do we then, assess the quality of that? There's two sides, isn't there? One is the skills and the methodology in being able to use the technology. The other is the provision of the technology. You can do as much as you can in terms of providing the technology, but if you can't marry that with the skills and methodology, it's going to be a challenge. So how much of those two sides do you need to balance?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think what I normally say is that the traditional conversational tree, can you say, is more or less dead, and the job is really in the loop now, or the control plane, right? And the control plane there I call the way that you guide the users through different agents inside of the conversation itself, what we call orchestration, right? So you can orchestrate between multiple, let's say 100 or 200 different agents, and you can switch between these agents in a single conversation. And it's all about, designing that in the right way while still ensuring all the parts around testing, test suites, and also capturing the results in a live production environment, and then using those results to sort of feed back into what I call a closed loop or a trust loop, which is basically a way for the platform itself to kind of learn, right? With a human in the loop, obviously, but so obviously the idea is that once you get production calls or production conversations coming in, then you validate that these production calls are actually looking correct, or if there's some areas, for example, where, well, if a user talks about a specific topic and we see that topic, the automation levels of that topic is very low, or there's a lot of human transfers there, well, then, how can we improve just that specific use case, that specific agent, to provide a better job? Maybe it's because that agent needs more integrations to the backends. Maybe it's because that agent needs more knowledge or different instructions, or maybe a different channel even though, right? It might be that this agent is not, we shouldn't offer this agent on a voice channel, we should only offer it on a digital channel, right? So there's these sort of choices for each of the topics that you're addressing.
Interesting. And how do you, from a platform perspective, your kind of goal is to essentially provide the capabilities so that a business can build any agent they want. Yeah. So, if it's a knowledge agent, then fine. If it's using tools, then fine. If it almost like the sky is the limit. But again, certain things are required, and certain things are nice to have. Certain things might be wanting to be done in a very specific way by the client, and two clients might be completely different in terms of their needs. So, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems as though you're kind of in a position where you're building out this capability that needs to be opinionated in some cases, because surely there's a right way of doing certain things, but open enough in other cases to enable a client to build whatever they want. So how do you make a call as to what you should have an opinion on versus what you should kind of almost leave to interpretation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think different customers have different risk appetites, right? We have some customers that are extremely risk adverse and don't want to take any kind of risk, and that's fine. That's where you start talking about predefined NLU-based dialogue flows and sort of LLM-based. And we still have a lot of customers that are using predetermined flows and LLUs. And I think they will, and I think all of our customers will probably have that even 10 years from now or 20 years from now, because that is needed when you talk about LLMs being probabilistic in nature, right? You don't want an LLM to answer the question of, do you want to transfer X amount of dollars from account A to account B? You don't want an LLM to provide that answer to you, right? You want to have a predefined answer there, and you want to be able to have a button or an LLU to determine whether you said yes or no to that transaction, right? So these are the sort of foundational elements of a when you talk about high risk conversations, as I call it, and I think so that's one of the elements. And then I think if you talk about generative or agentic conversations as a standard term, then I think there are some specific ways that you can build agents in a way so that they're safe. So there are certain guardrails. There are certain ways that you can design your conversation. The first thing starts with the agents themselves, so the fact that they have a topic that they cover, and that topic might be a high-risk topic or it might be a low-risk topic, right? If you're asking about, oh, I'm coming to your office and I want to park outside your office, then, how do I park there, right? That's kind of a low-risk conversation. So if you have an agent to handle that agent doesn't necessarily need that many guardrails, right? It does need the standard hallucination guardrails, various jailbreaking guardrails and so on, but it doesn't need maybe guardrails for a vulnerable customer, for example, right? So there's a choice there to make. And what we're doing in the platform is that we're providing the customer with best of breed guardrails, both what we call intrinsic guardrails, which are guardrails that are built into the agents themselves, but also LLM as judge kind of guardrails that are looking outside in on the conversation between the AI and the end customer, and in deciding on whether to interject or not. So a combination of both of these kinds of guardrails is the best choice. And there we also guide the AI trainers that are building this out to make sure that they are building it in a correct way. We have elements such as what we call global guardrails, which ensures that you have applied these guardrails throughout all of your agents, for example. So there are elements like that ensures safe conversations across the whole spectrum, right?
Interesting. Yeah, guardrails is a very interesting one because I'm assuming that the guardrails you're referring to there are almost kind of baked into the platform. Is that correct? So me as a company, I don't really need to be as concerned about the guardrails because you're making sure it's on topic, it's not going to hallucinate, it's not going to use profanity or be racist or whatever. Am I correct in that understanding?
Yeah, so there's both built-in guardrails, but there's also custom guardrails, right? So there are certain conversations. Going back to, for example, a conversation on financial advice, right? So maybe as a financial institution, you wanna design your own guardrail for that particular item because your way of providing financial advice might be very different from another financial institution. So from that perspective, we also feel that it's very important for the customers to build out their own guardrails. And coming back to the safety arguments around guardrails is that one way to ensure that these agents are actually safe is by testing them, right? So in the test studio, we have a number of predefined, test suites for jailbreaking attempts and financial advice and so on and so forth that you just, load into the system and then pre-test it to make sure that it works as intended, right? So there's a lot of these elements as well around how to, one is to design great and safe agents, but another thing is how to build tests that are actually validating that is correct, right? Yeah.
It's interesting, that question. I was just trying to find the article. There was an article and recently, and I believe I think it might be Anthropic, that essentially was saying that if you use our models in a medical use case, for example, and you make a diagnosis that's incorrect or whatever, we'll cover any legal ramifications that come from that. I think it was Anthropic, it might have been OpenAI, it might have been Google, I can't remember which one it was, but one of them has kind of said that they'll bear the legal costs of anything that comes out of using that technology in use cases where it might mess up, which is obviously nice for them to do. But I suppose it kind of it raises a very interesting question, and I think we're probably maybe we're getting beyond this question. And this question, I don't know if it's a relevant question or not, because some might say that the controls around these agents have gotten a lot better, that the risk of anything nefarious happening is far lower. Others would say the more powerful the models that become, like you look at Mythos and stuff like that and what it can do in terms of like cybersecurity and whatever, some might say that the risk actually increases over time. From your perspective, where does the kind of where does the responsibility lie? Because presumably you're using OpenAI models and Anthropic models and Google models and probably some fine-tuned models of your own. So you're leveraging a bunch of different providers. And so what the models do, you can only influence so much. Then the client's using your platform, which is building on the models, and bunches as well as other technologies. And then those guardrails are coming into play, which is provided by the platform. Then there's guardrails that I can infect as a customer. Yeah. And so, do you see where I'm going with this? So like the better the models become and the more powerful they become, arguably speaking, perhaps the more dangerous they can become if you've given them access to all of your company's tools and APIs and data and stuff like that. So, where do you think or see the kind of liability, if that's the right word? Like if I'm a big bank and someone has a conversation with my agent, it calls the wrong tool and produces the wrong data and moves the wrong amount of money from the wrong place to the right place or whatever it might be, if something kind of does go wrong, where does the liability sit, if that makes sense?
It's a good question. First of all, disclaimer: I'm not a lawyer.
Of course.
But probably I'm not. Should be careful with our wording here, but there's something called the EU AI Act, which is also clearly stating the different roles. So typically you have things like general purpose models, then you have AI providers, and then you have AI deployers. And typically what we would, or you would consider the customers or our customers to be AI deployers, in the fact that they are rolling out these services to their customers. So the best we can do, obviously, is to provide them with the best possible tool to set it up in a good and safe way, and then also be liable ourselves if some of the technology that we are supplying is not living up to the expectations. So obviously, in that sense, it's a bit of a shared responsibility, right? So that's the term that I would use, is that we're really good at guiding the customers in the direction that generates safe and good conversations. And I would say that another thing to be aware of when it comes to customer interactions is that it's it's not a decision engine as such, right? Even though it's an LLM that is talking to the end customer is still, when they're doing a transaction of money from one account to another account, then it happens through a backend system, right? So the decision itself is is driven by the customer, yes, but the our platform in itself is not a decision engine, right? Or at least, if you were to build something like that, it would probably be against our acceptable use policy, right? So there's that element to it as well.
Yeah, it's a minefield, isn't it? Because I remember in 2022 when was it Canada Airlines that got taken to court about that. Someone asked for a refund for their grandmother who'd passed away or whatever, and they were told one thing from the chatbot website, said something else, the agent who they spoke to said something else, etc., etc., etc. It wasn't actually, from what I understand, it wasn't a generative AI chatbot, that it just hadn't been updated with the new policy, but Air Canada were told that basically it's your responsibility because it's your service, and therefore if you're given the wrong information, you can't blame anything else other than yourself, basically. But it's an interesting area. You kind of touched on something there, which again is quite interesting. From Boost's perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of your use cases and clients, it's AI agents, it's conversational AI, conversations with customers, multi-channel, chat, voice, you name it. At the same time, if you kind of face that's like outward facing the customer. At the same time, if you face inwards, there's a lot of activity with businesses exploring kind of like agentic AI for more kind of like process automation based use cases. We had ING on recently talking about their agentic mortgage process, where as you submit a mortgage application, there's an agent that looks for new applications coming in. It goes and takes all the documents that have been submitted by the applicant. It looks at their policies and all its criteria, and essentially assesses whether or not that mortgage is complete in terms of the application. If it's not, it goes back and says you're missing this or that's wrong or whatever it might be. If it is, it then sends a summary to a human reviewer who looks at it and says, okay, we'll push this through to the next stage. So things like this, these kind of agentic processes that sit behind the scenes, I've always been kind of curious about where they sit, whether for Boost or your clients, because often the biggest limiting factor of a successful conversational AI is the data and the systems it has access to and the processes it sits on top of. If you have no data and no connectivity to any data, and your process is very manual and kind of like, very manual, human, old school kind of process, the conversational AI layer, it doesn't matter what models you're using and how sophisticated it is, it's not really going to accomplish a great deal. So sometimes you have to go back from the conversation, back into the business, to the process, to find and remove the waste in order to provide that great experience. And it always kind of seems to me that companies like Boost, because you're so prevalent at that interaction layer, and that's where everything's happening through, that it's the perfect place to be, triggering these processes behind the scenes. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of, the future of Boost and the agentic AI kind of components. Where is there a similarity in agentic AI for back office processing versus customer interactions, and how do you see those two areas kind of playing out?
Yeah, I think one of the key elements for me is that, in fact, customers never wanted an answer, right? They just want things done. So for us, I think it's all about how do we get things done, and as in I think 99% of the cases, it's not the AI that's wrong. The AI is working perfectly. It's usually either a context problem, and a system prompt problem, a knowledge problem, or other things like that, right? So typically it's the areas that are surrounding the AI that is not correct or not set up in the right way. So that's really where the challenge lies, as you say, giving the agent the right backend services, giving the agent the right knowledge, the right context, the right system prompts, and so on, to make sure that it's driving in the right direction for the customer. But for us in Boost, it's always been about driving the customer experience, the end customer experience. And yes, we do have customers that are using our platform for internal use cases a lot. But I do agree that there's a gray zone perhaps between that customer interaction and then things happening in the internally in the company. And yes, as the models become more and more or more and more thinking and bigger, they have ability to connect in multiple systems. But I think it has to be done in a safe way. On top of that, you have all the new protocols around A2A, agent to agent protocols and MCPs that are also driving a new sort of reality, both for us but also for everybody else in the business. That maybe in the future it's not going to be the customers that are driving our revenue. It's going to be agents, right? So you might have a customer, talking to Claude or talking to ChatGPT, but in fact it is talking through our platform to a finance institution somewhere, or vice versa, that you might have an internal agent within a company that we need to activate for a specific use case or specific action, right? So all of those cases is something that we are supporting or building out, and I do see a thriving ecosystem in this area. We're seeing payment agents, new specifications, new protocols also being emerging in those areas. One challenge though is typically that when you're driving MCPs or agent to agent, it's pretty simple protocols and implementations, but they tend to drive the latency up. So from a voice perspective, having agent to agent or MCPs is usually not a very good idea. Yeah. That's the only maybe problem, is that you need to design a good voice conversation around an agent to agent inferred conversation to have a good end customer experience around it. And there you can use things like what we call smart fillers, like injecting an LLM while you're waiting for the end results of a query that you're asking. We're seeing for some of the more complex public sector customers, for example, that have very complex answers to the end customer, that some of the answers given are even better than what the humans could bring, right? So it's also amazing to see that transition happening now, that the LLMs are providing a better answer than what the humans could do, because we might be dealing with people that have started and been a couple of months on the job, and they are simply not able to provide a good enough response to the end customer. So and I think for the future for the AI trainers is definitely going to be on focusing on this trust loop, right? Making sure that the whole self-awareness area is sort of being or working as intended, right? That if there is a production conversation that is not fully or have the best customer experience, then it's all about, well, how do I improve the agents? How do I add that to my testing suite? And making sure that you have using the right model, the right instructions, and so on to fit that particular use case. So that's for sure a challenge in the future.
And what are the component parts of, you mentioned trust loop a few times. What are the component parts of that trust loop?
So typically, there's a schism of test-driven development. Back in the days when I used to do work with IBM, for example, then you had this test-driven development where you write the test before you write the code. It's a little bit the same now with agents, that you can write the tests before you actually start to design the conversations, or you can start writing an initial agent and then automatically run the test while you're building out the agent, for example, right? So there's elements of that. So testing, building, and then in the end evaluating the production conversations you're getting in, and then adjusting the agents and the testing based on that. So that's the three elements basically. So tests, build, and deploy, and then you have the evaluation, or the evals as you call it, and then based on those, then you can backfeed that into the system, right?
And how are you thinking about kind of that testing then? Are there specific things that you're testing for? Does testing come at different stages in that cycle? I wonder if you can explain a little bit about that. Where does testing fit, and what specifically are you testing for?
Yeah, I think we started out by saying, well, testing is a separate silo-based functionality, can you say? But what we realized is that testing is maybe more inherently to sort of build test loop, right? Because when you build out agents initially for a specific use case, maybe you're a little bit unsure of exactly what you want to achieve with that. So maybe you build out a first version, and then based on that, maybe you can even, based on the way the agent is written, you can generate some tests based on that. So it's all about that sort of ongoing cycle of iterating, right? So it's a little bit back on an iteration cycle where you're building out a little bit of an agent, then testing, then going out and building a little bit more, then testing some more again, and then once you're sort of in the zone, and you make sure that that all of the conversations that you're having are giving a fantastic user experience, well, then you're done and you can go home, right?
Yeah, we wish.
But I think it's also due to, just coming back to maybe what we talked about initially, I think the whole agentic economy and agentic coding also means that as the price for code goes down, what really is the challenge is the remaining 20%, right? Which is all about what I've been talking about now: the testing, the evaluation, the deployments, and making sure that those things are actually working as they should, because otherwise you won't get a functioning customer experience, right? So as a CTO, it's especially important for me to make sure that safety, orchestration, all of those things are part of the overall experience when you're building out a new conversation.
I'd be curious to get your thoughts on, so probably a few months ago now, I kind of had this, I don't know if it was an epiphany, probably not an epiphany, because I'm sure plenty of people have had the exact same thoughts, and I've read about it as well, which is that, you mentioned earlier that, conversation design as it was in terms of mapping out flow charts is dead and stuff like that. And then if you start to think, I don't know, I haven't seen the Boost platform for a while, so I don't know if this is how you have it set up, but if you look at Anthropic's agent platform and others like that, it's agents building agents.
Yes. You
just describe what it is that you want the thing to do, and the agent that you're talking to will build the agent that you will end up talking to once it's done. Yes. And so, it didn't. So the thing, getting around to it, the thing that I posted was basically, I think that the whole idea of designing and building agents will disappear at some point, because all it really takes is, let's say you have an agent now that sits on your emails, your phone, and your chat. Just taking ingesting everything that comes in. And that agent's job is to do one thing, which is tell me what it's about and assess what we need in order to deliver. So a live agent, a human, is having a conversation, and in that transcript of that conversation, you can see everything that needs to be done. All the information that needs to be captured from the user. The thing that's missing is what tools are we using behind the scenes. But if you provide access to the tools that you have, and you wrap them up in either an MCP or whatever, and you say, okay, this suite of tools are for this process, this one's for that process, this one's for that process. So one agent that maps the customer interaction, another agent that then assesses what tools we need to use and what have you, another agent that sits in the middle and says, right, well, I'm going to define some tests for this based on what I know, another agent that runs the tests, and one that analyzes it, and one that makes the improvements. And it's like, you can imagine a world where all of this activity could be automated. What level of quality would it have? I don't know. But I don't know if you concur with that vision. Is that where it's going, or do you think there's some pretty fundamental blockers in place that will prevent that?
I think there are some fundamental blockers in place. So one of those blockers is the fact that all of customers, they never have updated context, right? So they have one support article that says something, and then they have an internal procedure that says something else, and then they have some chat somewhere that says something. So there's multiple variations of what's actually the truth within any customer, right? If you ask a bank about some It could be many different things, right? But just so what we're seeing out there is that our customers' source data, the context that they're supposed to train their models on, are not correct, right? And they have to when they look at that material, they need to make a decision, right, on what do we want this agent to answer in this specific case, right? So there's many active decisions in that process. And then there's another, and even if you get all of that right, there's still the fact that not one human can sort of can do everything. So even if you take the best customer support representative at any customer out there now, they might be really good at one thing, but they're not good at everything, right? And then there's the brand and the way the customer needs to be working from a strategic perspective as well. So for a bank that today maybe is dealing mostly with enterprises, but they want to move more into the private sector, or working with the private commercial bank or commercial customers, then it's another different use case. It's another strategic direction that might not be known by the customer support. And then a third one, which I would say is also very important, is the way the whole society changes. And I have a good example of that is that we have a customer in Iceland where there was an airline where there was an incident with a volcano eruption, right? And when that happened, you had 5,000 people standing in the airport, not really knowing what to do. So those kinds of events also triggers, something that the models might not know about, right? Or might not be trained for handling. So how can you very quickly adjust the AI models to accommodate those scenarios? I think that's also a big challenge, and all of that requires human work in some form, right? So I don't think even in 10 years from now we'll still talk about those things, because it's an ever-changing environment that the AI models exist in. Remember, again, like 99 point something, the AI is not wrong, right? And also all about the context, the system prompts, the knowledge, the guardrails, all of the other stuff, right? So that's an important learning, I think, that I have had for the last couple of years at least.
There's another counter to that as well, which is that sometimes you will have a look, or you will experience an AI agent, and from a kind of purist, kind of like experience point of view, a lot of them lack in many ways. So, for example, I'm sure you're familiar with Grice's maxims, which is kind of like the defining principles of a conversation, and one of which is to be relevant, which means not to talk about something that's not the topic of the conversation. And another one is the maxim of quantity, which is only given the right amount of information and only enough information, not too much information. LLMs, one, don't always stay relevant, which is the hallucination risk factor. But the second is the whole idea of quantity is often missing. I've seen chatbots with responses that are a mile long that would take you half an hour to read, and you've got to scroll back to the top of the interaction to get the beginning of it and stuff like that. So there's little things like that where actually, and ironically, as great as the models are, in some cases, they need an awful lot of work to distill it down into an actual palatable and natural feeling interaction. I think people think that LLMs are just great at conversation, but sometimes actually they're not, and they take a lot of guidance to be able to have a conversation, if that makes sense.
Correct. Yeah. And you can say the whole market for LLMs are exploding at the moment. We have many different providers in the platform. We'll be getting even more, and we're also providing now our own custom built LLMs for generative. So I think, and one of the reasons for that is that we're seeing that it's very, very different depending on what kind of specific use case you wanna do, on what kind of models you want to do. So if you're doing voice, obviously latency is a big problem. So there you want, maybe some fine-tuned, simplified models that are even running on custom hardware or custom infrastructure. So because what we're seeing with the global LLM providers, and I'm sure you've seen that with OpenAI and so on, is that their operational capabilities are horrible, right?
Yeah.
They're horrible. I mean, all of them are, and you see it and it might be just for a couple of seconds, right? You might get an LLM request which takes like 5, 6, 8 seconds to run, and that's just not doable for a voice conversation, right? So how do you ensure that consistent response rate in terms of when you have millions or billions of conversations, right? And that's I think one of the big challenges is that one thing is the latency and the size of the model, but it's also around where you run this model, right? How resilient is the infrastructure that you're running these models on? And these are huge computations, many GPUs and many data centers. That is a big problem, right? Because LLMs are being used for a lot of things nowadays, and even more in the future. And I think the scarcity is going to be on the infrastructure and the data centers going forward as well. And that's particularly true for our case when you have these voice conversations where you need very high latency or very low latency, but also very high performing and clear responses as well, right? And I definitely think that there's that, as you say also, right, that there's a tendency to provide very long responses, and I don't think that's necessary, right? As I said before, when customers are talking, then they don't want an answer to the question, right? They want their issue fixed. And in order to have that, you need all the backend systems, integrated, but you also need, and then you need to provide some simple responses, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if I'm understanding you correctly there, then you are a fan of the kind of fine-tuned, smaller model approach in specific instances.
Yes, for specific use cases for sure, and then in other cases you might want to build in a much more complex one, right, with thinking and lots of backend integrations and so on, where there's even where the agents can also self-orchestrate the integrations that it needs to get the job done, right? So all of that is supported in our platform as well, and I think that's an element of. But again, it's like from a use case to use case perspective, right? You want to be very specific about where do you want to use the bigger models and where do you want to use the smaller ones and the fine-tuned ones and so on, and you will have a whole suite of those across your platform.
And where do you kind of do you see a lot of clients kind of looking to build their own custom models and stuff like that? I think Boost is in a position whereby you are kind of, you're in a position to have fine-tuned models for certain tasks that are kind of within your wheelhouse. So, entity extraction would be a good use case, making sure that you're pulling out names, addresses, dates, stuff like that seems pointless using a massive, 300 billion parameter model to just pull a postcode out of a sentence. Even maybe conversational patterns, dialogues, things like that. I think that's a good area of some fine tuning. Make a natural conversation after you've, hundreds of thousands of millions, billions of conversations have been through the platform. So you've got all that kind of data. Do you see much interest and activity on the client side with businesses wanting to build their own fine-tuned models and integrate them into the Boost platform or not?
I usually, it happens, but I usually advise against it, and the reason for that is very simple. That the Boost or in Boost we have this principle around, if there's something wrong, you should be able to point the finger at us, right? And I see a lot of the other our competitors in the market that are offering, pluggable speech-to-text, text-to-speech engines, and so on. That initially sounds really well, but once you roll this out with millions of conversations, you have some problem with that particular provider. They might be down for a few minutes, an hour. That's huge, right? Huge problems, and then you can't point the finger, right? You can, or we can point the finger, back to the customer, right? And I think that's one of the principle of us is that you should be able to point the finger at us and say, Boost, please fix that, and we can fix it, right? But if you start mixing, different providers like that, it becomes a problem to maintain operational, excellence for a longer period of time, right? And especially as the volumes grow.
Yeah, absolutely. what are, just coming before we sort of wrap up, what are some of the, I suppose, some of the things that are really kind of exciting you right now? We've spoke a lot about agentic AI, spoke a lot about testing, spoke a lot about best practices, fine tuning. What area right now is like really exciting you in terms of AI?
There's a lot of areas, but I think, I mean, right now in terms of voice, I think an interesting aspect to our platform is the adaptive voice principle. So the ability to change the voice profiles while in dialogue, I think is extremely exciting, because it allows you to do some new and exciting stuff, like the switching between a speech-to-speech model and a speech-to-text-to-speech pipeline model. Very interesting conversations you can have there. And I think also just in profile switching, there might be elements of a customer conversation where you don't want the customer to interrupt, for example, or there might be language switching, right? So real-time language switching between different languages, because obviously with speech-to-speech models, it's always like, if you start mimicking a specific accent, you almost hear the speech-to-speech profiles answering back in the same accent, but you don't really want that to happen necessarily. You want to be able to be in control of language switching and other things like that. So all of that is encompassed in adaptive voice for us, and I think that's really exciting. And I think another point is the ability for us to have voice diarisation, so being able to identify multiple voices in a conversation and being able to separate them out to do various things in the conversation while it's ongoing. So you might have, when you're dialing in and then your voice is saying something, or your wife is saying something in the background, then you can sort of, or the TV or something like that, the models can actually separate out the different channels and make sure that it only listens into what you're saying, or maybe to what both of you are saying, but with two different voices, right?
That's really good.
So that I think is very interesting. Going a little bit ahead, I would say it's also about avatars and the possibilities that brings. So the fact that you don't necessarily just have the voice anymore, but you also have a living, picture or video running, I think is also an interesting aspect that can bring, new user experiences as well. And then I think, the thinking models and the way that we see that these bigger models are running also enables us to do much more orchestration than we could before. So I think that's really interesting as well.
Brilliant. Nice one. Well, that was absolutely fantastic, Rasmus. Really appreciate your time. Really interesting conversation, and hopefully maybe in a few months' time or so we'll hear how all of those new technologies are being put to work in Boost, and we can get back together again.
For sure. I would love to.
Or maybe our Boost camp. We'll hear about it at Boost camp, no doubt.
Oh, yes, for sure. Yeah. I can't remember. I think it's in October. Yeah, sorry, I haven't prepared the messaging there.
Nice one. That's all good. Nice one. Rasmus, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you again on the next one. Cheers now. Bye.